let's go then to your story in Finland. You're as a researcher, through your time as a researcher, finishing your PhD, and also through your present role at HundrED.
Yeah, so I did my PhD here at the University of Jyväskylä. It was a comparative study because I've always been very interested in like how it is that comparison can kind of bring us a new lens to see something, to see the familiar as strange and the strange as familiar, so we kind of find the tensions and harmonizations between different ways of doing things. I think that was something that I have learned living in Finland, is that when in the community where I grew up, there was, I don't know, it was just like often this sense that this is the way things are. Like this is just the way the world works. Now, living in other countries, I very quickly learned that that's not the way things are everywhere. Like, in fact, there's like a bajillion different ways that people are trying to accomplish generally similar things, right? Like people want to eat and they want to get together and they, you know, like similar things are trying to be accomplished, but in very different ways, and in ways that in one place something that would be absolutely appropriate is somewhere else the epitome of rudeness for the same thing that you're trying to accomplish, right? So it made me really realize that like this isn't the way it is. There are many alternative ways that we can organize ourselves, and those ways are all equally human, but some of them are more like functional for harmonious societies than others. That was a tangent.
Yeah, I was going to ask what your theme then was for your PhD studies,
for my PhD
and
studies,
the thesis in the end. What was, let's say, the main title or the theme?
It was like,
of your research?
Trying to remember. Yeah, it was. I think it was professional learning of teacher educators in Finland and Japan. So it was a comparative look at these teacher educators in different contexts and how it is that they understand their own professional learning, and how it is that they understand their collective agency as a group to be able to make change. And I wanted to understand kind of the way it is that the location and the situatedness of those folks in different places influences the possibilities that they feel like they have for working together or working independently. And to me, I think one of the most interesting findings from that research was that because of the way that the university systems are set up in Finland and Japan, like in Finland they try to make concentrations, they like profile universities where they kind of group all the people who have similar expertise in just some few places, which means like, for example, in Finland, like everyone who's studying sports is at this university, right? So that opens up different opportunities in the faculty for people to like collaborate together, because they very quickly find the synergies and the kinds of things that they're passionate and interested about over a long period of time, even if the administration like steers the ship in one direction or other, and the faculty has to kind of like bend themselves into whatever the ship is saying, which is different than the structure in Japan, where there'd be one person at a university who has a kind of expertise, maybe them and then a junior person. And so what that means is that like networked collaboration among scholars is usually across universities, not within a university. So like maybe they get together to like do co-curricular things, but mostly the professors are more isolated into their own work, which was fascinating to me, because I had not expected that. I expected there to be much more collaboration, like as I had experienced in the high school level. But of course the university system is very different, and for the professors there that were in my study, the academic freedom was really important to them. It was really important to them that they had that ability to like explore widely their own interests in their own domains, which I see a tension also. Some of the researchers in Finland didn't feel that like breadth of academic freedom necessarily, but I think that in terms of collective agency, they were able to coordinate more and make more institutional change and resist the administration and like guide, I don't know.
Okay, so to dig deeper into your research, let's say, career, both as an academic, but also now lately in your role as a director of research. If you can paint a picture of how the differences are and what you continue doing and what your role is at the moment.
Yeah, so it's been really fascinating to come from like the pure academic university space into HundrED, where we're much closer to the practitioners, first of all.
Yeah, maybe you can also mention a little bit what HundrED is, what kind of organization it is. Take us back a little bit, yeah.
So I'm the director of research at HundrED, and we're an organization that looks for innovations in education globally. We look to identify them, which means we're both taking in submissions and applications from people who are doing innovative things, and we also looking for them. We're ourselves kind of going out and emailing people and asking them to come onto our platform. HundrED has a free platform where you can go and you can search by like whatever you're interested in, if it's math education or social emotional learning or STEM, I mean, like you name it, financial education, literacy, play-based, whatever. And then people can put their own innovations, which are programs and practices and interventions and schools, and they can put that information on our website for free, and then you can search it for free. So it's like this kind of like open platform where people can upload their innovative practices, and then you can also search for different people's innovative practices. But then what we do on the research team is we like look at all these kind of applications that people have made, all these pages, which are, the applications are basically like public profile pages in a way. And then we look at them and we curate two kinds of collections. One are these thematic and regional collections, which we call spotlights, and that's basically to spotlight or like highlight some theme in education or some region in education. We're doing one right now on Qatar. We did one last year on educational technology in Bangladesh. We have one running right now on child-centered learning with Montessori group. So it's so we do those kind of spotlights, and then we're calling for people who are working in those areas to submit their innovations, and then we review them ourselves, and then we send them. We have this review process where people can sign up, and then we also recruit. So we always have this kind of two-way where like people can volunteer themselves, and then we're also searching for specific people that we would either like to apply or like to participate in the review. So then we have this process of like crowdsourced reviewing of the innovations. We want to understand how impactful people feel like the innovation is and how scalable they find it. It's kind of a demand-driven piece that we would say like, how much would you really want this? What is the value that you see in this kind of work or innovation? So it gives the innovators some feedback on what they do. And then the other kind of collection that we curate is this annual global collection where we choose 100 innovators doing 100 different things from all over the world that have already been shown to be really impactful, really scalable. They have traction not only in one context but generally in multiple contexts where they've been able to communicate what it is that they do and spread it. And I think for me, the interesting thing about coming to HundrED has been like trying to think about how it is the things that I have been interested in prior to coming to HundrED are still relevant, or like how it is that I can find my own research interests in the work that HundrED does. Because I think like when you're a researcher, you're trying to focus more and really drive this expertise. But at HundrED we take a really wide view, and we're doing formative assessment and social emotional learning and gamified curricula. We're doing things that there are people who spend their entire academic career just learning about that. So to be able to be comfortable, like first of all, like finding the people who really are the experts around that, and very quickly understanding from them, okay, like what is the state of the art in this right now, and how would you understand it, and then curating a group of those people to help review the innovation so that we have like a basis in that, and to also review the reports that we do so we get feedback on them. Like that's a different skill set than being like just a researcher yourself when you're like just kind of developing your own expertise. And I think the other thing has been for me trying to understand where my interest in like social change and how it is that education contributes to the good life and a good society fits in with the narrative of innovation in education. And for me, I think like the overarching thing is that it's about change, right? It's about how it is that we do new things, that we do things better, that we situate the work. And I think the thing that I've been most excited to dig into is how it is that we think of like the spread or the transfer of ideas and practices between people across places, and how we think about that as like diffusion, but also the kind of, which implies this kind of like natural, organic process of things just like happening, or then on the other hand, things that are more like intentional and policy based, right? So trying to understand that kind of top up and top down, bottom up, and then kind of what happens in the middle as people are making sense of the possibilities for change in their own contexts.
And how many years have you been at HundrED now?
3 years.
3 years, yeah. So can you give us a few examples of lessons learned or best case practices regarding these transformative innovations in education, and also maybe painting a picture of how you define innovation in education as opposed to maybe just technological innovation, as many people think is also educational innovation, whereas it might actually just harm how people learn and develop if it's a modern technology putting into use in the wrong way. Right. So some best case practices on how these transformative changes have been started or shown, been shown.
I mean, I think I'll start with your second question, which is like, what is the definition of an innovation? And I think at HundrED we've tried to take a really wide perspective of what innovation can be, primarily because the innovation has to do with the novelty in a certain context, right? So it is a practice or a tool, it could be a technology, but doesn't have to be, because it also can be a method, a novel method that has been shown to have a meaningful improvement. And again, using these words like meaningful, it's situational, it depends. Something that is like completely revolutionary in my context could be old hat for you, and it's not really new, you wouldn't consider it innovative. But for me, it could be radically innovative. We have never even really heard of that or tried it before, right? So I think the situatedness of the innovation has to do with that. But it's basically like something new that is an improvement. It has a relative advantage over what it is that you are doing now, right? And I think that relative advantage is really important, because it assumes that, you know, there are many different things with innovation. It could be that this, like, you've never even tried tech in your classroom. I mean, it's like not been done. Or it could be that you're already doing something and this just augments that. This just improves it. It doesn't have to be like a complete replacement for what it is that you're doing. It could also build on your existing practices in a way that improves it. And in that way, it could be that it doesn't have to be with tech at all. It could be with like a method that you're using that integrates technology in a different way. Actually, a lot of the innovations that HundrED chooses don't have anything to do with tech at all. They're completely methods, right? So I think that that's important, because fundamentally it's about ways of like behaving differently. It's about different ways of interacting with the student, different ways of scaffolding, different ways of organizing your time, organizing the space, how you present the concepts and in what order, and how you attend to the student's own variation and their mood of the day. Like, so much, we talk a lot about like really what innovation is. It happens when the teacher is in the classroom. It's the teacher who's going to be doing those things. So I think that and at HundrED we've been really interested recently in understanding like implementation and implementation science, and I think that that's a whole new thing for me. That's not something that I had known about or researched before, so that's been really interesting to learn more about, like, what is implementation science and how do we understand this. But that's another space where I think when people hear implementation, at least in the sort of like development space, it's policy, it's top down, it's like, this has already been decided, now you're going to implement the policy, which means you just do it, right? But at HundrED we've been trying to think like, are there different ways of thinking about implementation that are more like the teacher's experience of that, the teacher's agency in doing that, their own appreciation of the relative advantage, their own appreciation of like the complexity of like, do they get it? Do they understand what it is and why they think it would be better, right? And then those kinds of questions.
Could you give an estimate of how many innovations are tech related versus non-tech related?
It's certainly, what I would say is that like I think it's like equal between blended and in person, and then some portion is digital, and then there's all these other things where they like didn't answer, or it's like some other.
Yeah, I would actually like to highlight maybe a selection of your innovations, your selected innovations from maybe last year or this year, this half year. At some point, we can do that as a follow-up, and I would love to get back to that.
Yeah. I was going to answer your second question,
please.
Which is like what are some examples of innovations that like these best practices. I mean, I think like a lot of the ones that HundrED has highlighted maybe wouldn't come as a big surprise to people who are working, for example, in education and development. I think that, for example, the speed schools, where you have different ways of getting kids who have been out of the system back into the system. So in somewhere like in Finland, that's not really an issue, but in other countries, when kids drop out and they're not able to be at grade level, then they're kind of just out of the system. So I think that speed school and these kind of like catch-up remediation programs to get kids back into the system at grade level, like I think that's one example. And I think that for me, we did a report last year called The Messy Middle, and we highlighted Teaching at the Right Level Africa. TARL Africa is an organization that's been implementing this. And TARL has been used was developed by an organization called Protham. And it's a methodology where they kind of break apart the idea that like, because you're this age, you need to be in this grade, and rather you attend to like, what do you know how to do, and let's start from that. So for example, you can have mixed age groups, right? And for them, what they were talking about is that like, that is just like for some people that's like blowing their mind, and like that's a huge innovation. Just the notion that you could have mixed aged group classrooms based on the kids' ability level, so that like they are learning something which is like within their zone of proximal development, right? It's not way above what it is that they can be expected to do by themselves because they haven't been in school, these kinds of things. So I think, to me, I feel like those are some of, and that's, to me, like that's an example of something that's really based on like a pedagogical understanding of development and learning, and it's not just like this kind of linear progression that school can be, that like they're this age, therefore you need to be in this grade, but rather attends to like the student themselves and trying to help them to continue in schooling and in the system.
Yeah. Okay, so let's focus on Finland for a couple of minutes before we end. What would be the best pieces of Finnish education and Finnish pedagogy that you would like to highlight from a global perspective, as far as you know it?
As far as I know, yeah. I mean, for me, there are just so many things, and it's so difficult to say from a global perspective, because so many of the things that make Finnish education really fantastic are not currently feasible in other systems. Like, it's a whole package of all the things that come together that make Finnish education really strong. From, for example, like maternal health care, going all the way back to like, they're not going to be catching a kid who's dyslexic when they enter the classroom, like, because maternal care is so good, and because the care in the the neovola system is so good, that like people are attended.
That would be one element that I would highlight. Let's say the maternal care.
Yes, maternal care.
So one key element in the early childhood development, for example.
And then the other key, like maybe I have like 10 key elements, and the next key element.
List them all.
I just made up 10, but I could try to give you 10 key elements. The next thing I would say is that it's not only like there's a coordinated effort between different actors to take care of the kids. Of course, the parents are supported in ways and given like a stipend, like what is it, like €100 a month, just because your kid exists, right? And that helps with things like making sure your kids can have the right rain gear and snow gear, because you need all this gear all the time because the weather is pretty miserable a lot of the time.
Intense,
Intense, maybe.
So we say there's no bad weather, just bad
clothing, exactly. But then the fact that like you get a stipend, I guess, from the state to make, for the parents, right? So parents are well
like a child support.
Supported. Yes.
Child care support.
Yeah. So the parents are well supported to provide for their kids.
Yeah. Well, we can list those things, please. But I would also like to highlight that they're not free. I mean, we pay high taxes in Finland, so we are paying for them by having a lot of people working, and that's maybe at the end of the spectrum. We might not have that in 10 years, 20 years, as we don't have enough children to pay for the elderly care in the end. But let's go to your 10 list.
Yeah. So then
so
then the other thing, what I said, that there's like teachers generally have more support in this system than they have in other systems, right? They have like occupational therapists and special education teachers. And then another thing is that teachers have more time for thinking and work. They teach less hours of the day. The other thing I think is that the school system has a little bit more flexibility here in terms of like when the kids go to school and when they leave school, and I think it makes for like it gives some breathing room also for the kids. That you're not just in school from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. every single day.
The well-being aspect is taken care of.
The well-being aspect. The recess, the kids are playing. They're playing outside. Rain, snow, sleet, hail. There isn't really a weather yet that kids are not outside running around and like getting some activity and exercise. So I think that it makes it easier for them to come and sit down and concentrate when they concentrate, because then they also really get to run around when they run around. And that goes up until like 6th grade, right? I think like even later. And then when the kids are older, they're like still like in school less. I think that teacher preparation is a huge part of it, right? There's very few universities in Finland where you can get the teaching credential. It's very difficult to get into those programs. The application or the acceptance rate is really low, right?
Yeah,
it's
about 7%.
Yeah, I mean, it's more difficult to get into that program than some Ivy League schools in the United States. It's really competitive. That's not to say that, the people who got the best scores on the matriculation exam are going in, but it does mean that it's really competitive to get in once you apply. A lot of people don't make it. And and my sense is that one of the reasons is because they funnel it at that point, right? The universities gatekeep who gets into the program. And then once they get in, they're really well trained. You still have the normal school system where they're in the classrooms working with teachers who are professors of education. They're professors of teaching university students how to be teachers, and they are teachers themselves. So they're able to model that, right? So you have this coordinated system. It is not perfect. The reality in the normal schools is very different than the reality in like another school. But in any case, some countries don't have that at all, right? Where you get to like watch and go through even from their first year. And I also think from my understanding, it makes it easier for them to kind of weed people out who realize that this is not what they want to do kind of early, because they're very quickly, at least at the University of Jyväskylä, where they have still had it, at least when I did my research, that you once you get into the program, it's a 5-year program, and you get into the classroom even that first year. So so I think that kind of coordinated training, which then also leads to a situation where you have like strong professional networks of people who know each other because they have studied together at university. So if you think about like every single person who is going to be a PhD or not a PE teacher in Finland has studied at the University of Jyväskylä. They have a lot of control then, and I mean that in a good way. Like there's a coordinated conversation that's happening here around what makes good physical education teaching, and what is the state of the art of research here is what is being also taught in the classes there, right? So there's and I think that's another reason that education in Finland is good. There's a really tight connection between research and teaching and policy and the teachers union. Like there's a coordinated effort between these organizations to at least dialogue with each other around what it is that education should be and what the curriculum. Again, they just had in 2016 the curriculum reform, and they're going to have another curriculum reform. It seems like maybe it's too soon, but at the same time, just the fact that there can be that dialogue. In other places, there can't be that dialogue. There is no dialogue. So I think that's another reason. I think that another reason is that in the teacher training programs, the teachers learn how to do research. They do a bachelor's thesis. They do a master's thesis. And this is not like a white paper or something. It really is, they need to learn how to write a theoretical framework, how to conduct research, how to do data analysis. They need to understand methods and a discussion section and how to do that. And what that means then is that they know how to read peer-reviewed research articles because they know how to interpret that, right? So that's something that isn't happening in most places either, right? So there's so many of these pieces that lend to the professionalization teaching, which brings me to my other big point, which is that the teachers have so much autonomy. But they have so much autonomy because they're so well trained, they're well respected, and they can be trusted. And there's just a huge amount of trust in the Finnish system, and I think in Finnish society in general. It's very safe, and there's time to talk to one another.
Yeah.
And I think that the slow pace of life in Finland, I think it's becoming faster, but generally there's breathing room here. And I think that makes it possible for people to stop and think and not make any snap decisions, but just let's see how it goes. There's a lot of patience, there's a lot of waiting, and let's just see. There's not a lot of, and I think the way Finns talk about education is also not alarmist. I think when we lived for 3 years in the United States while I was doing my postdoc, we were in Los Angeles, and my daughter, she was in kindergarten, for that year, right into the pandemic. So she was the first semester, and then it was the pandemic, and she was 5, and we were already getting notes home that she was in danger of failing kindergarten, and there's this urgency that whereas here, they're, of course she has the dual language issue as well, but there's more of an attentiveness to what help does she need, what can we do, little by little, waiting, watching, providing support, talking, trying different tactics, right? And the narrative isn't she's failing. The narrative is this is what's happening, this is where we are, and this is what we're going to do. These are the options that we have, and what do you think about that? Do you think that those are good options? What support are you providing? How is it going at home? What else is going on in her life, right? Those are the questions, not, and so I think it's the time to have those conversations is probably one of the things that makes it possible for teachers and parents to have trust and dialogue with each other, is just to have time.
So a few things that you would recommend parents and teachers to think about abroad as lessons learned from Finland that you actually can, let's implement despite the culture, context, politics, and other environment that is local.
Yeah, I think for me one of the main things would be that I think that very little of this is solved with individual effort, one person just gunning it through and being I'm gonna be the best helicopter mom of all moms, right? Or one teacher being I'm gonna sacrifice myself for all these kids and give them the best education. What really needs to happen, in my perspective, is at the system level, you need to open it up in some way so that parents who love their kids and want the best for their kids, and teachers who also love those kids and want the best for those kids, just have the time and the space to sit down for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. We've had hour-long conversations with the teachers. That's really time enough to get into something and really talk about what do you observe. So that's the kind of thing that I would say is need to happen. It's just time for dialogue, and that's not something that one individual parent can accomplish, even if she's sending emails or showing up to PTA meetings, because it isn't really at the PTA meeting. The parents, we did this really great research, I think, at HundrED about parental engagement, and what a lot of the school leaders that we interviewed were talking about. They said really the parents come and they want to talk about their own kid. That's the thing that's really important to them, right? And of course all these other things are nice, but to really have the time to talk about their own kid, the system doesn't necessarily allow for that now. And so I think that it's more on school leaders and administrators to think about like what can we take away so that people can engage more and the time spent together can be more meaningful instead of like ticking boxes.
Yeah, so, well, in general, from a more individualistic, competitive approach to a more, let's say, collectivistic, collaborative approach, trying to, let's say, be more open with the needs, but at the same time, listening to everyone, having everyone both being able to contribute, but also being able to take care of their own needs.
And I think that the challenge with that is that like even in like one of the like Finland in a way is very collectivistic, but at the same time like there is this expertise, like the teachers are the ones who train. Actually, it was really interesting. I saw this like story about we were right when we moved here, when we moved back here, and our oldest son, we were in a parent-teacher meeting and we were just asking like what can we do? Should we hire a tutor for our kid? Like what would make the most sense? And they were like, no, you should not hire a tutor. It is our responsibility. You do not have pedagogical training. I don't, to be a second grade teacher. I'm not a second grade teacher. So that, you know, and their kind of stance was like, you shouldn't have to do that. Like it's our responsibility as a school to make sure that your kid gets the education that they need. Period. End of story. We're not going to recommend to you to do anything like paying extra money or something like that. And they arranged for a tutor and they arranged for these kinds of things. And like, to me, that's the kind of amazing thing about the system here, where it's not like you as a parent need to do more. And if you're not doing more, you're lazy. And then it creates this tension between the parents and the teachers where the parents feel like what they're doing is never enough. Parents who, by the way, most obviously probably don't have any kind of pedagogical training. They know nothing about teaching math or anything. And even if they're well educated themselves and like make sure there are books, they probably don't know how to do that. But then on the other hand, you know, that the teachers are themselves recognized not only as people and giving of themselves to be there, but they also they really have an expertise themselves, and then the parents can trust. So I think that it goes both ways.
That's the key word, also that parents actually can trust the teachers and the schools to do their job.
Yeah.
And then teachers and schools need to also know that parents can be trusted to do their parenting job. So a collaboration there.
Right.
Okay, so let's finish off with a few top, maybe non-educational best elements of Jyväskylä. So what would be some top things to do and see here in the Athens of Finland?
Well, I think, like you had said before, you were talking about coming up on the train, like, oh my gosh, the woods, the lakes, the nature here is so beautiful.
Driving actually, so we could enjoy it and stop wherever we wanted.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. When we moved here, we lived out in the student housing that's like a 40-minute walk, and we would walk through the woods every day to the campus, and that was really the time when I just fell in love with Finland, is just like walking through the woods. It's so beautiful. And actually there's really nice biking trails here also. The city is very bikeable, and then also out into the other like neighboring little villages is pretty bikeable. The lake is amazing. I recommend the sauna boat if you haven't done that. And then there's a really nice cruise on Lake Päijänne that takes you around. So it's not, I've had family visit before, and they kind of joked like, oh, we thought we were coming to Europe. I'm like, well, yes, but you know, this
is the Nordics, this is the northern part of the
Nordics, yes. So this is like the forest. If you want to come to the forest and be part of the forest and the lakes, but it's so relaxing, and I recommend that. And there's also I'm trying to think what else.
But I think that's so important that we shouldn't underestimate the power of just walking in the woods, nature,
fresh air.
Exactly, disconnecting from technology and finding our humanity with nature. I think that's so powerful, and reading a lot about about that. Like the Digital Minimalism is a book that I just finished that I'm going to also summarize a little bit about regarding key lessons, how to really be productive with technology and not just efficient and doing things as fast as possible. And it doesn't help our human development much if we go into that race.
Yeah.
So we have beautiful forests in Finland, and that's, I think, so powerful. And just walking in the woods, as you said, I think could leave it at that, and that would really help people be more creative and do a lot of new innovations in whatever fields they're working in.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Crystal. This was fantastic, and I would love to just pay attention to what you do and follow up at some point.
Absolutely.
I welcome you back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.